Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Upstream Innovation, Packaging Solutions. My name is Kayla Martins, and I manage RELA's Environmental Programs and Retail Compliance Center. I'll get us started today with a couple housekeeping items and help moderate our Q&A later on. I'm also joined by Kevin Gibney from RELA, who will also be helping to run the show. Next slide. For those of you unaware of RELA's Retail Compliance Center, we have a number of resources related to environmental compliance and sustainability that apply in retail, including introductory information as well as detailed reviews of regulations and variations in state requirements. You'll see some of the resources we have here on the right. For more information, you can visit us at www.rela.org/RCC. Next slide. As you are probably aware, each of you were muted upon entry to help reduce background noise during today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be housed on the Retail Compliance Center site for future views. This does include the slide deck. To pose a question or comment, please use the Q&A box you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Questions and comments will go directly to our speakers and moderators, which is myself and Kevin. We will answer those questions after the conclusion of the presentations. We do launch a survey poll at the end of the webinar to gather feedback and information on today's presentations, so please make sure to fill that out and stay until the end. Next slide. You'll see our antitrust slide here. I will not read it in full, but I will share that RELA believes strongly in competition. Our antitrust laws are the rules under which our competitive system operates. It is RELA's policy to comply with both the letter and the spirit of antitrust laws. This antitrust statement has been adopted to avoid even the appearance of impropriety under the antitrust laws. So please keep this in mind for our webinar and Q&A today. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. Okay, well, I'm happy to introduce our speakers for today. We will first hear from Josephine Christopherson, a research analysis for the new Plastics Economy Initiative for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We will also hear from a few retailers today. We'll hear first from Kate Worley, Manager 2, Sustainability Zero Waste Strategy from Walmart, John Kolarczyk, Senior Director, CSR and Waste Reduction at Walgreens, Dan Leskovic, Senior Manager, Environmental Sustainability and Waste Reduction at Walgreens as well, and Laura Beres, Senior Director, Strategic Portfolio Delivery at Ulta Beauty. We thank you all for joining us today. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Josephine.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kayla. So I'll just get my my slideshow up here and take over from you. So there we go. Hopefully you should be able to see the slide now. So yeah, my name is Josephine, and as Kayla mentioned, I work as a research analyst in the innovation team of the New Plastics Economy Initiative of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And I'm really excited to be with you today to talk about upstream innovation and its opportunities for accelerating the transition to circular economy for packaging. So the Upstream Innovation Guide was published by the Foundation back in November 2020, so not that long ago. And it's really building on the reuse book that some of you maybe know that we published back in 2019. And it was kind of our attempt, I guess you can say, to gather all of the knowledge on circular economy and on plastic packaging into this very comprehensive and practical guide with all of the relevant information you need. So this could be information on where to start, what good looks like, what could be the role of LCAs, what's reuse looking like in the times of a global pandemic, and lots of information like this. And today, I would really like to take you through some of the thinking from that guide, from the Upstream Innovation Guide. And I'll do this by giving you an introduction to what upstream innovation is and how to think about it and how it can be carried out. We'll then dive into reuse specifically, and I'll share some of the kind of typical hurdles, but also the opportunities that we often hear of in this space. And then I want to introduce you to the online Upstream Innovation Universe that we also created as kind of a supplementary resource to the guide itself. And I'll take you through some of the assets that we created, which you can find on that universe. But before we dive into that, I'm actually quite curious to hear from the audience who have heard of upstream innovation before. And I'm actually just realizing now that I'm probably having trouble seeing all of you participants, your screens right now. So this exercise is not going to work as well as I had hoped it would. Oh, I can see now someone raising a hand. So that's great. Yeah, if you could please raise your hand if you've heard of upstream innovation before. I see lots of notifications coming in now. So very cool. Okay, great. So we're not starting completely from scratch here, I can tell. So we'll just head to the next slide here. So a good way that I think is to think about upstream innovation, a good way to do that, I think, is actually by considering this question on the screen here, or considering what you would reply to this question. So if you came home to find that your apartment was flooding, would you immediately start mopping up the water? And actually, my guess would be that most of you would first try and locate the source of that leaking water and stop that leaking from happening, and then you would start to mop up the spilled water. And that's also exactly what upstream innovation is. So upstream innovation is really rethinking the products and the services at the design stage. So this could be things like material selection, the business model, the packaging design. And downstream innovation then affects a product or material after its first use. So this is, for instance, collection, sorting, and recycling technologies. And I want to stress that, of course, both of these types of efforts are needed in order to achieve a circular economy. But you could say that there has been, for the past years, a bit of a disproportionate focus on the downstream efforts. And if we are to really address this problem of plastic pollution at its root, we need to move upstream and eliminate waste by design. And there are actually several reasons why you should be approaching this issue of plastic pollution by moving upstream. Of course, as I said, it's the only way that we can really tackle plastic pollution, because through these upstream efforts, we can prevent waste from ever being created in the first place, instead of only trying to figure out how we can deal with a big pile of waste. But it's also a means to provide the type of solutions that customers are actually starting to ask for and are starting to want. So Unilever, for example, was able to track a correlation between products with a positive sustainability profile and products with the fastest growth. And then, as you will see from the case examples that I will go through in today's session, this is also really kind of a blue ocean of different business opportunities. And upstream innovation can also be a means for you to address other environmental goals that you might have other than tackling plastic pollution, such as, for example, carbon reduction through, for instance, optimizing some of your operations. And SodaStream, for example, have found that making sparkling water at home creates 87% less emissions. And then starting to innovate upstream is also a way, in some contexts, to get ahead of the changing regulations that we're seeing happening. And finally, I think moving upstream is simply joining what we can see is becoming the new normal. So with the Global Commitment and the New Plastics Economy Initiative, we have more than 1,000 organizations, equaling 20% of the industry, united behind this common vision and targets for a circular economy for packaging that's also based on upstream thinking. So I think this is really a good indication that this is the way we're headed. So now I've hopefully convinced you of why you should be exploring upstream innovation, or at least intrigued you as about to why you should be exploring it. So let's then dive into how you can actually do this. So in order to unlock these opportunities that we just went over, we need to actually start shifting our mindset. Because what we've been doing for a few years now is that we tend to focus just on the packaging itself, and often we tend to focus on quite incremental packaging improvements. But with the upstream innovation mindset, we're being forced to also consider the business model and the product itself, and how we can really rethink these aspects to also unlock new opportunities. So the upstream innovation mindset is really all about identifying these new ways that we can deliver value to users whilst we're designing out waste. And what we identify in the Upstream Innovation Guide is that there are 3 key strategies for doing this. So you have elimination, there's reuse, and material circulation. And I won't actually talk about the 3rd strategy, material circulation, today, but I still really recommend that you, at some point, go read the guide and dive a little bit into this strategy as well to explore how we can actually use upstream innovation and upstream thinking to ensure that packaging does actually get recycled at the end of its life. And now I know that most of you are probably most interested in reuse, and I promise that is what we will spend the most of this session on. But I want to briefly take you through what elimination can look like, because elimination can be a lot more than just bans on items like straws and plastic bags. So when we apply the upstream innovation mindset to elimination, we see that there are 2 different approaches for elimination. There is direct elimination, which is simply removing packaging that does not serve an essential function. And then you have innovative elimination, which is indirectly eliminating packaging through innovation, and then achieving the functions that that piece of packaging provided in an alternative way. So let me give you some examples to make those different approaches a little bit clearer. There's, for example, Tesco, who removed the plastic film wrapping from their multi-buy tins, eliminating 67 million pieces of film per year. And of course, these multi-buy deals that was on the tins, they just remained in place, and they were simply then applied automatically at the checkout counter. So a really simple yet quite effective way of actually reducing packaging. And a similar example is what we see from Asda, but they kind of applied it to a different product type. So here they removed the clear plastic wrapping from 92% of their greeting cards and eliminated 50 million individual wrappers per year. And throughout that process, they actually didn't document any adverse rise in product damage. So again, it is very much possible to eliminate these unnecessary pieces of packaging without it being having negative results. Then we move into a case study that shows the innovative elimination approach. And this is from Appeal. So Appeal, they have made this edible spray-on coating that's made from plant-based material. And you basically spray it onto to fresh fruits and vegetables, and it helps extends the shelf life of that product. So it helps reduce food wastage without the need for the plastic packaging. And Appeal have launched product lines with retailers like Walmart, who's on the line today, and Asda and Kroger as well. Another innovative elimination example comes from Danone and their Aqualife bottle. So what you can see here is that Danone actually shows how you can communicate without having the typical shrink label on a plastic bottle. So what they did here is that the branding and the information itself was actually embossed using a technology onto the bottle, and the barcode then printed onto the cap itself. And another great example of how you can also communicate without a packaging comes from Lush. So Lush have actually been rethinking not only the business model, but also rethinking the product itself, where they have transformed a liquid shampoo into a solid shampoo bar. But of course, when you do that, you eliminate the need for packaging, and you're then left with no packaging to really brand and communicate on. But the way they overcame this hurdle is by having the Lush Lens app, which is a product recognition technology that provides customer with all the information they need when they're in the Lush store. So this was just to give you kind of a taste of what elimination can also be. And I really recommend that, that you also go explore this section more in the guide, and highly recommend that you also consider opportunities like this when you're reconsidering your approach to plastic packaging. So let's now get to the point that you've probably all been waiting for, which is about reuse. So when we started out working on reuse in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, there wasn't very much talk about it. There wasn't that many companies working on it. But what we've really been seeing in the past few years is that major brands are making explicit commitments to exploring and implementing reuse. So for example, Coca-Cola, who's aiming to scale up reusable packaging in Brazil by 30% by 2030, or Mars, who are aiming to launch 10 reuse pilots by 2025 in different geographies and across different brands. So although there are still quite a lot of unknowns in the reuse space, there's still things that we need to test and learn. There is a lot of positive momentum happening in the space at the moment. And there are different ways of doing reuse. And the way that we have defined the reuse space is through these 4 different models. And I'll now go through them one by one to really show you what it is and how it's being done, and show you some case examples that help communicate and illustrate some of the main barriers, but also how those barriers can actually be overcome. So let's dive right into the first model, which is refill at home. So in this model, the user buys a reusable container and some refills, and this could either be from a physical store or it could be from an online shop. And they then assemble that product at home, and once they've used the product, that same kind of main packaging is used alongside with new refills to make more of the product. So in this model, the user or the customer retains ownership of the main packaging, and they're responsible for cleaning it. So to give you an example, a very famous one at that, SodaStream from PepsiCo, I'm sure that most of you know that. So this is a great example of the refill at home model, where you as a customer, you buy this reusable bottle, you buy the returnable cylinders of CO2, and you buy the machine itself. And you then simply use tap water and the machine to create sparkling water at home. And I think SodaStream is also such a great example of how reuse can actually help enhance user experience. So using this in-home appliance, it allows customers to make fresh sparkling water on the spot when they want, in the desired quantities they want, and they can even mix and match and add in different flavors to their liking. Another great example of refill at home comes from Replenish. And in this model, the customer purchases a reusable durable spray bottle, and they purchase these pods of concentrates. So this could, for example, be for home cleaning products. And at home, the user then screws these pod of concentrates onto the reusable bottle and then pushes down to fill up the desired amount of concentrate. So for example, if you wanted a really strong cleaning product, you could use all of it. Or if you wanted not a very strong one at all, you could just use a little bit, or you can use measuring lines that are provided within the bottle itself. And you add some tap water, and there you go, you have your final cleaning product. So aside from also being customizable in a way, what's really cool about Replenish is that they're also a reusable bottling platform that can actually be adapted to different types of products and can be shared across brands as well. So to give you a little bit of a summary of this refill at home model, as you can see from the examples, the typical hurdles of user experience can often be overcome by having a really nice packaging design, making it easy to engage with, maybe even making it customizable. But another typical hurdle that we hear of in terms of this model is related to the fact that it can be quite difficult to market or to communicate to customers the value of buying this little pot of concentrate that actually has 6 products in one, especially if it's placed next to these full-size normal cleaning products in the store. So some ways of overcoming that is, for example, by implementing or going through e-commerce channels, which both SodaStream and Replenish does, because the customer doesn't have that comparison of the full-size bottle next to the concentrates. So there's less of having to clarify that on an e-commerce platform. Or what we would potentially see the industry working towards is making refills like this the industry standard, so that we can use shared platforms such as demonstrated by Replenish to have multiple brands use that type of format for the products. And although, as I mentioned, that this system really asks for the customer to engage in assembling the final product themselves, as I mentioned, making the packaging durable, making it user-friendly are just some ways of actually making it quite an enjoyable experience for the customer to engage with this type of model. And when it comes to this model, it's all about considering how the product could be supplied in a solid format or in a concentrate format like like the replenish case. Or and for this case, it's good to start with products that have a high water content. But also consider maybe if you are on an e-commerce platform, how you could tap into auto refill services, or allow for the customization of the packaging or the product itself to really enhance that user experience and to build brand loyalty as well. And of course, a key thing to keep in mind for the refill at home model is that you wouldn't want the packaging that the refill comes in to end up creating more waste than a single-use model. So it's important to make sure that the refills are provided without packaging at all, or that they're provided in packaging that's reusable, recyclable, or compostable. So moving on to the other refill model, which is refill on the go. The customer in this model still retains ownership of the reusable packaging, and so they're responsible for cleaning it. But in this model, the customer has to go out to a physical store or to a designated dispensing point to refill that packaging with the desired product. So for example, this is the case in PepsiCo's PepsiSpire, a fancy drink fountain, where, and this could be placed somewhere like on a university campus or in densely populated areas in a park or something like that. And here the customer, they can bring their own bottle to refill at this dispensing machine, which is a smart powered soda fountain. So the customer can actually customize and mix their own drinks as they desire when they're refilling. A slightly different example of the refill on the go model comes from Miva. And Miva, they really show how bulk dispensing can actually be done in a safe and a hygienic way through the integration of IoT. So in this case, or in their system, the products themselves, they travel in and sit in these airtight canisters. And this really helps eliminate the risk of contamination during refill and during dispensing. And through RFID tagging, the canisters here, they can be tracked throughout the supply chain or throughout the supply journey to really ensure traceability. And Miva has carried out pilots with Nestle, and based on the success of those, Nestle decided to scale that system to I think it was around 16 of their shops in Switzerland. And actually just a little earlier this year, Miva also introduced a partnership with a major French retailer called Intermarché, where customers in the Intermarché Paris store, they can go in and purchase 45 different products from this Miva dispensing system. But smart and hygienic dispensing systems is also what Algramo is offering. But actually, Algramo is also solving another key challenge that we typically hear of in this reuse model, which is that they are actually bringing the dispensing system to the customer's doorstep, or almost to the customer's doorstep, lowering this barrier related to convenience that we typically hear of in this reuse model. So both Miva and Algramo, I think, are really great examples of how typical hurdles such as hygiene management and a lack of convenience because the customer has to bring their packaging somewhere to refill can actually be overcome. So before I sum up this model a little bit, I'm actually really curious to hear from you what you experience to be, or what you think might be. I don't know, maybe some of you already have experience with these types of models, the refill on the go model. So what do you think might be, or what do you experience might be some key hurdles for your organization in terms of implementing a refill on the go system? So we've just launched a poll now, and if you're willing to share, it would be great to see some answers coming in there. Okay, really cool. So yeah, definitely this, I guess the lack of interest from consumers, often related to the convenience, difficulties of managing hygiene. Okay, I think we can close the poll now. I think we have a pretty good view of the general key barriers. So here we have majority probably related to the lack of convenience. All right, thank you. So as you can imagine, and as you have identified, these are really the typical barriers that we hear of. But as we've also seen from the key examples that I just highlighted now, these typical barriers can be overcome by utilizing new technologies, or considering the distribution of sale points, or partnering directly with brands to help ensure that those products can be supplied in bulk. And for this particular reuse model, a really great place to start is with dried foods, for example, such as pulses or pasta or grains, as they have fairly minimal packaging requirements. Or you could start with beverages that are consumed on the go, such as what we saw that the Pepsi Spire takes advantage of. Or with products like pet food, for example, where hygiene control is maybe a bit less of an issue than it is with food for human consumption. And then a really key point to also keep in mind for this reuse model is that to engage customers and really help them transition to this new way of shopping, consider having staff on the ground that can help guide customers in how to use dispensing systems, for example, have really good signage and communication, at least in the initial phases, to help customers understand how to engage in this new way of shopping. But it could also be key for you to make sure that the whole refilling process in the back end of the dispensers is made easy and quick for your staff. So for example, this could be using these kind of pre-filled bulk units that click right into a big dispenser, like Miva is a great example of. All right, so now we're turning into the return space. And I should highlight here that the key difference between the two refill models and the two return models is that in the return model, it's the business or the retailer, the provider, that has ownership of the reusable packaging. So they're responsible for setting up some type of infrastructure or system to get the packaging back, and they're responsible for cleaning it and refilling it. Now, for the return from home model, the product is then provided to a customer in a reusable packaging. And once the customer has then used that product, the packaging is picked up by the business or the retailer from the customer's home. And one of the probably best known examples of this comes from Loop, who's a global reuse system providing these very well-known branded products in durable and really nice reusable containers. So when the customer has used the product, the empty packaging is collected by Loop and it's sent through a professional cleaning and refilling process. But the return from home model is also what Able & Cole implemented in their Club Zero system. So here customers, they can purchase a variety of different products online, and they receive the products in these decanting jars. So it's the white jar actually that you see on this picture here. And Able & Cole, what's interesting about it is that Able & Cole have on purpose made these decanting jars quite simple and plain and a little bit dull looking to help ensure that customers are more likely to return it. So instead of having a really fancy, nice looking jar that customers might be tempted to keep at home, they on purpose made it very simple and dull. So what these cases also show that is that by using more simple packaging such as Able & Cole, the return system is made accessible for non-premium products because it's a lower investment in that reusable packaging. And by allowing businesses to tap into an existing infrastructure, Loop is really helping, for example, retailers to overcome some of the hurdles that can be related to the cost and environmental impacts of the reverse and cleaning logistics. And a return system like this, so the return from home model, works particularly well in urban areas where the distance between customers is fairly minimized. But it also works really well for e-commerces where something like auto replenishment services can help enhance brand loyalty. And because return systems do have this kind of added layer of infrastructure requirements, it's good to consider perhaps how you could optimize operations, for example, by working towards a shared packaging design across brands, or make sure that the packaging you do use is designed so that it's easy to clean, because often turnkey solutions will charge you based on how easy the reusable packaging is to clean. And of course, since the business in this type of system is the owner of the packaging, they also have a greater economic incentive to ensure that that packaging actually gets returned and reused multiple times. And examples of how you can ensure that return is, for example, as April and Cole does, but also through deposit and reward systems, or for example, by offering the 10th refill for free if you return your packaging. Now, the final consumer-facing reuse system is return on the go. And just as in the previous model, the ownership of the packaging here lies with the business or the retailer, and the customers, they then have to return the empty packaging at a store or at a designated drop-off point away from their home. And this is the model that's applied by Coca-Cola in Brazil. So they created this shared design for beverage brands across their company to really simplify logistics, and found that actually both carbon emissions and water use were significantly reduced through optimizing their operations in this way. So in this model, the customer, they purchase a filled bottle at the retailer, and they're incentivized to bring back the empty bottle upon their next trip, for example, to the store, through a deposit system. And then Coca-Cola is then in charge of picking up all the empty bottles from the retailer, putting them through a cleaning, refilling, and relabeling process. And a fairly similar system comes from the MMP glass jars, which is a shared reuse system in Germany. And as you see on the picture here, there's 3 different brands that are actually tapping into this reuse system and using it for different types of products like dry and chilled products. And so when the packaging is empty, the customer can return it through a shared network of reverse vending machines in the area. And then to help ensure that the packaging actually does get returned, you could also consider, instead of maybe implementing a reward or a deposit system, you could also consider implementing a penalty system, which is what Vital here does. So Vital, they provide this returnable packaging system for takeaway foods, such as salad bars and retailers. And by having a penalty system in place, they actually saw a return rate of 97.5%. And for online retailers, you could consider using reusable shippers like these for online orders. And here you see LimeLoop, who rents out these smart shippers to web stores. And the shippers, they're chipped and paired with a software that can allow web stores to actually geolocate the shippers, get feedback on customer experiences. They can even track environmental savings and so on. So similar to some of the other examples, this is a system that you, for example, as a retailer, can tap right into. Now, again, as we just did before with the refill on the go model, I'm curious to hear specifically for return on the go, what do you think, or have you experienced it be, or what do you think might be a key hurdle for you in terms of implementing a return on the go system? So we're seeing definitely cost and environmental impacts of reverse transportation, it seems. All right, getting a few results here. I think we can close down the poll so we can make sure that we get through all of the content. Yeah, so I can see you've all identified, or the majority have identified, the costs and environmental impacts of reverse transportation to be a key barrier. Great. Just close down the poll there. So this is, of course, as you have rightly identified, one of the key hurdles that we also hear about in the return on the go system. But as we saw from some of the examples earlier, you may not have to implement or invent these systems yourself. You may be able to actually tap into existing infrastructure, use turnkey solutions, or potentially work with others or work across brands to really make a shared system work. And a good place to start for return on the go can be beverages. This is mainly because it's quite a well-tested system for beverages in different countries. There's also focusing on products that are consumed on the go, such as takeaway food. And then, of course, as I've kind of insinuated a few times now, shared infrastructure and standardization is really what we perceive to be some key solutions when it comes to scaling return systems, to really make them economically and environmentally viable as well. So to wrap up our reuse journey, I wanted to highlight to you also the opportunities that you actually have to engage in reuse through your business-to-business systems. So in B2B reuse systems, the reusable packaging, of course, only moves between businesses only. And this could be something like the Swedish return system, which is an industry-led collaboration that's based on a shared system of reusable crates and pallets for business to business between wholesalers and retailers. And these wholesalers and retailers, they pay a user fee, and a deposit for the use of the crates and pallets. And then the Swedish return system manages the whole take back, quality control, washing and redistribution of the packaging. And actually the system has been in place since 1997, I think, and has over 1,500 businesses using it in Sweden at the moment. You could also consider if it's worth or if it's a good opportunity for you to tap into a more global system like CHEP, for example. So a global business-to-business supply chain logistics share and reuse system for standardized pallets, containers, and crates as well. And what we really see, as you can probably imagine, as the key trends in this reuse space is related to standardization and smart systems, as we saw in both the examples as well. And a good way to figure out if this type of reuse system is worth for you to engage in is that you could start by identifying some current places in your B2B chain where you're using single-use packaging at the moment, and then maybe explore if there's already some existing turnkey solutions for that particular type of packaging that you could actually just tap into. All right, so I really hope that I've managed to inspire you to explore the world of reuse even more. And I'm sure that some of these cases has perhaps been a bit more inspiring or interesting to you than others. So I'd love just to have, for the information, to hear from you if you're willing to post in the chat. I don't know if you're able to, but if you are able to post in the chat, could you please, if you want to share your insights, share with me what you think was the most interesting case that I went through in this session so far. So I'll just let you post those comments while I move on with the presentation. So we've been through a lot of kind of inspiration, and now it's all about, of course, also taking that inspiration and taking action on it. And as retailers, I think there are different ways that you can engage with these different models. Some are definitely, depending what type of retailer you are, more relevant than other models. But I see kind of three key routes as a retailer that you can engage with reuse. There's, for example, engaging with your private labels and work with them to pilot a reuse system for one particular or multiple product types. So this is, for example, what Waitrose and Partners in the UK did with their Unpacked pilot. Or you could partner with a large brand or FMCG to trial reuse for a particular product type with them. As I mentioned earlier in this session, big brands are really starting to engage in this space as well. So there is a great opportunities for leveraging that momentum. Or you could tap into the existing reuse platforms, because as I mentioned a few times, you really may not have to invent the whole system yourself. And then I think for some retailers, it's also important to remember that you are often the consumer-facing identity, or you have that role or that position. And unlike some other actors or stakeholders, you have opportunities to also take the customers on that journey and enhancing their transition to this new way of shopping. But of course, these things are always kind of easier said than done. And I realized that first, it may be necessary for you to really explore perhaps with your team or the relevant department, well, what reuse model is really right for us, for our products, for our business model, what types of products should we be focusing on, etc. So this is actually why we've also made the online Upstream universe, and especially why we made this asset pack of different types of resources that you can really use to help you kickstart your thinking and help kickstart that thinking that can get you to move on to the implementation phase of your Upstream innovation journey. So what I'd like to spend just the last few minutes of my presentation on is to take you on a little tour of this asset pack. So if you bear with me for just a moment while I switch into the online universe. So I've preloaded it for us here, because otherwise it would be a bit too slow, I think. So this is what it looks like when you enter the Upstream universe. And Here you'll find kind of like a high-level interactive summary of the content from the guide. And if you hit the resources button here, you'll then be taken down to the bottom of the page where you can see different kinds of assets. And I won't go through all of these today because we don't have time for that, but I will just focus on showing you the case database and the workshop asset. So let's first jump into the case database. So the case database is where you can find all the different cases that are profiled in the guide. And it gives you different filtering options. So for example, you could choose to look up examples in North America, and you could say that you were interested in only examples that relate to a particular product type, such as fresh food. And then the database will show you the relevant examples, and you can click on these different cards to show more information about that particular case and read more about business benefits and environmental benefits and stuff like that. So let's go back to the resource overview on the Upstream Innovation universe. So the workshop toolkit is down here. And what we've done with the workshop toolkit is to hopefully really help you to kickstart your upstream innovation process by creating this plan for how you can run a workshop, and also using the software Miro, creating kind of a virtual workshop whiteboard. And before we jump into that, I just want to highlight that in the supporting materials here, this is where you can find a facilitator's guide that will have all the information you need to know about who should I invite to the session, how long should it be, all the different kinds of speaker notes that you might need, and different advice on how to run the exercises. So jumping into the Miro board, again, I've just preloaded it for us here, but this is what it looks like. So as I mentioned, kind of a big virtual whiteboard. And on the top of the page here, you'll find kind of a getting started frame, which is where you can find some basic information for you and your workshop participants about how to move around in the Miro board. So you can zoom in and out and move between the different parts of the board. And then what we've done in the workshop board here is that we've created these slides that can help you to do an introductory presentation to upstream innovation. So this is actually also some of the slides that I've drawn on today. So you can talk about what upstream innovation is, why you should be exploring it. There's also information about the 3 different circular economy strategies, and there's information more specifically about the different models. And then we have put in some case studies as well, so you can use those to kind of illustrate what those models are. And if you feel like some of the case studies we've already put in the slide presentation are not relevant for you, you can always go to our case study library over here on the board and drag in those that you think are more relevant for your particular context. So once you've hopefully then gotten your participants up to speed on what upstream innovation is and why you should be exploring it, you can use this Miro board and the different exercises in it to help you really get started on your upstream innovation process. And this is, for example, through the use of this exercise here, so called Everything on the Table. And you can use this with your team to discuss some of the essential functionalities of a current single-use packaging that you might have in your portfolio, and use it as a stepping stone to evaluate, well, what is necessary, and how could you reimagine either the product or the packaging or the business model. And then for each of the circular economy strategies, we've created some strategy cards. So this could, for example, be this one for refill on the go, and how you could implement and how you could do it with smart dispensers. And then the idea is that you use some how might we questions, and you drag down the strategy card that you think is the most interesting to really help you steer the brainstorming in the right direction. So here's one example of what that exercise can look like at the end of it, with lots of post-its with ideas, some questions, and grouped into different categories. And you can run this exercise with different how might we questions. You could run it with different strategy cards. You could even do it for some of the different circular economy strategies. That is very, very up to you and what's relevant for your particular context. So it's highly customizable, this workshop toolkit. And then finally, The workshop is also designed to help you vote on ideas and narrow in on the most exciting ones. So if everything goes well, you will actually leave this online workshop space with your team with a lot of excitement for upstream innovation, hopefully, but also have a list of 3 particularly exciting initiatives and some clear next steps defined that can help you to continue the journey of bringing those ideas to life. So this was just a brief tour of the online universe, and I hope that has inspired you to go look into the guide and look into the online website as well. And we'd always love to know how these tools work for you if you use them. So please don't hesitate to contact us with feedback if you do use them. And now I will hand you back to Kayla and the team to get us to the next point of the agenda. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Josephine. I was hoping I had some vacuuming in the background, so I'm so glad that ended right when you did that. Thanks again. As a reminder to our audience, we will get to Q&A after all our speakers have a chance to present, but if you have questions for Josephine, please go ahead and submit those. We'll now turn it over to our retailers to show what they are working on as far as reuse. So let's hear from Kate Worley from Walmart.
All right, hello everyone. Thank you for having me today. Today I'm going to talk about the Beyond the Bag initiative. So Beyond the Bag, for those who aren't familiar with it, is a multi-year collaboration across the retail sector with the goal of identifying and implementing innovative solutions that serve the same function of today's single-use plastic bag. And the consortium continues to grow, but there are 38 publicly announced retail partners currently. And I know there are multiple people on this webinar from companies participating in the consortium right now. So just a call out that we really look forward to, the year to come and all the work we're going to be doing. Next slide, please. So the Beyond the Bag initiative spans across 3 years and it's multiple work streams. So since the project launched in July of 2020, the focus has really been heavily on the innovation through the launch of the global or Beyond the Bag challenge. And in parallel, we have conducted policy mapping, for example, customer research, and then we've also started some of the supplier and infrastructure engagement. Next slide, please. So the Beyond the Bag Challenge was launched in the fall of last year and initially received over 450 innovation submissions from around the world. We've engaged in one-on-one meetings as well as several rounds of deep dive interviews and ultimately ended up voting among the retail partners, environmental partners, closed loop partners, as well as IDEO, to shorten that list to 58, which is what you see here. And then ultimately, next slide, please. We landed on a portfolio of 9 winning solutions that best met the overall criteria. And high level, those criteria were customer and retail performance being one, health and safety, of course, viability and adaptability, as well as a set of environmental and social criteria. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, you can go back one. So we'll talk about the 9 here. So the short list then, or the short list of the 58 became 9 winners, and they cover a range of needs. So the first and the left isn't what we're focused on today, but just to go through them very quickly is the innovative materials. So those represent the best in class opportunity within every category. Domtar is specifically a flexible fiber bag. And then below that, plastic free is an innovative starch based bag. And then finally, the last one, Sway, is seaweed based. And one note that's important, maybe obvious to the group, but that's important to mention, is that the consortium decided to eliminate petroleum-based plastics from the proposals, really because the goal of the consortium is to go beyond the current bag. So next over are the reusable solutions, and really they came from different lenses. The top Chico bag is really a bag form and bag system. Below that, Go-A-Tote is a bag rental system, so kiosk based. And then third, Returnity is really a packaging and delivery pickup system. And then next to the right, and still related to reusable systems, is enabling technology. So looking at 2 customer-facing apps as well as one enabler. And I think the important thing for that is that, you know, some of these apps can interact with the customer, also with the retailer as far as tracking, and then incentives, which is one other potential with some of these technologies. Next, please. So we kind of went over high level the reusable systems, and a lot of the more detail is in this slide. I think it is important, you know, when we look at the winners, just to note that they will receive a portion of a $1 million in non-equity funding, and they will be eligible for additional funding and support from the consortium partners to help with testing, piloting, and scaling efforts for their technology. So in the end, we really look forward to piloting the winning solutions in our stores, and we hope to learn more about, you know, what the path will be going forward. That is it.
Thank you, Kate. We appreciate it. If you all have any questions for Kate from Walmart regarding her presentation, please submit those in the Q&A box. Again, we'll get to those shortly. We'll go ahead and turn it over to John and Dan from Walgreens to share a little bit about their Buddy Bench project and Loop partnership.
Excellent. Thank you, Kayla. I'm going to talk a little bit about Loop, and I will start by saying I'm definitely not the end-all be-all when it comes to Loop, but my original conversation with Tom Sackey years ago at this point at a conference that I was speaking at introduced the Loop idea to me, and it sounded really exciting as a possible path forward, or at least a chance to stand in the batter's box and try to make a change. And I will say that people on our team have taken this idea and really run with it and worked closely with our operators to bring this thing to life. And I say all the time that Lauren Stone from our team kind of drove this to the finish line, but since it's all happened, I think it's more she drove it to the starting line rather than the finish line, because it's really begun to evolve and to take shape in ways that we're getting rather excited about. Next slide, please. So I know Josephine, one more, sorry. So Josephine talked a little bit about what Loop was, so I won't get too in depth on this. I'll let Dan talk a little more about the project that you haven't heard about yet, but the recyclability and consumer or customer delight piece to this was very important to us, where over the years, you know, we've done a great job, the manufacturers have, of reducing weight and finding new and innovative ways to save money on packaging. But in the process, the recycling rates and the consumer delight has deteriorated, driving us into a big problem that we're all in right now together. And certainly something that we've noticed, and know that there isn't going to be one silver bullet, no perfect way to solve this. It's going to take multiple innovative ideas and different groups to come together and try to solve some of these things. But Loop specifically, next slide, please. Really is a circular shopping platform. The idea is to really transform the packaging of things that you use every day, from single-use disposables to more durable feature pack designs. So you see here some Axe deodorant. It talks a little bit about how it can cost up to 10 cents. So that's 10 cents per single use. The idea is that you can make something that will cost a little more on the front end, but eventually through reuse opportunities drive costs down, which is an added benefit, of course, for everyone. Always looking to find ways to drive costs down, but also how do you continue to drive that triple tier strategy of people, planet, profit. So this is a way that we can do all those things. Next slide, please. So operates within household consumables. I know I saw a question earlier about clothes and clothing. We're not there yet, but really we're talking about consumables, personal care. Here's a small sampling of some of the different groups that we work with through the Loop platform right now. So of course, the first one's my favorite. Everyone loves some ice cream. But a pretty wide variety of things, always expanding, working with other CPGs to figure out how can they get involved in this, and this is something that they would find beneficial, and always trying to increase our reach with Loop. Next slide. A lot of words on this one. That picture is kind of big there, but the way it stands today, it's a subscription platform. We run it through our e-commerce part of the business. I think we're piloting it in 3 or 4 states out east. Customers go to a link through our website to the Loop model. They can sign up for the things that they want, receive their products in a reusable tote. Think like a milkman kind of model. If you could see the Loop returnable tote all the way on the right-hand side of the picture there. Used packaging will be sent back to TerraCycle, and then they clean it, sterilize it, refill it, sent back to the manufacturer to use again. Like I said, right now we're using it as an online platform. We are trying to think about ways that we could roll it out into more of an in-store program. I think we're looking at the New York area as a possible place to do that. Always looking to bring more CPGs online to try to figure out how do we get the best reach on this and get people what they want. So our original commitment really was, hosting that link to bring customers to that one-page site where they can sign up, harmonize our communications to make sure that people know what it is and how it can benefit them. And really, there should be one more bullet point on there to see how do we expand it? How do we get it in more places? How do we get more people involved? How do we get the word out that this is a potential path forward on some of these projects? So we're certainly waiting to hear back from a lot of suppliers on future and expanded participation. We're really working on that. We're also working on potential store launch, like I said, hopefully in the New York market where we can try select stores to see how it works while it's in use inside of our stores. And right now, I think Loop in the US is through Kroger and Walgreens. So we're both involved with Loop at this point in time. And, we know that there's other things around cost and environmental impacts of reverse distribution and all the things that come in with this stuff. And what we're looking to do is try to make positive steps forward. I use the term progress, not perfection. We know that there's no one way of solving the problems that are in front of us. But if we could take small steps and trying to figure out new ways of doing business that are innovative and continue to drive down some of those environmental impacts, either on the front end or the back end, hopefully both, then we're really on to something. So it's certainly a chance for us to, like I said, step up to the plate, take a swing at something to see how it works. So far, the feedback that we've gotten is quite good. We're continuing to add new folks onto the platform all the time, and it's something that we're going to continue to push. Next slide, please. On the sustainability side, certainly there's lots of things to take into consideration really on anything. This is just a little information around the Loop model for shampoo versus a traditional e-commerce model. Lots of words on there as well, but you continue to see that it shows that this initially has a greater environmental impact. We are aware of that. It does break even between the second and third use and becomes about 50% more sustainable at the 5th use, continuing to drive down, but then it levels out at about 75% after the 11th use. So again, not the silver bullet we all want, not something that solves all of our problems, but certainly a new way of looking at some of these reuse models and a potential path forward, combined with some of the other things that I'm sure we're all working on to try to make the world a better place. Next slide, and I think I'll pass it over to Dan to talk a little about Buddy Bench. I'm happy to answer questions on the back end as well. So I'll pass it over to Dan to talk a little bit about the Buddy Bench project.
Okay, can you guys see me okay here?
Yeah, we got you, Dan.
Okay, just double check. I can't see myself on the screen. I think what we've seen just in the past couple of years that the recycling markets have kind of tightened up a little bit, where it gets harder and harder to recycle certain materials. It seems like recyclers are gravitating a little bit more towards high value commodity materials like cardboard, high value shrink, and some of the low value commodity materials are getting tougher and tougher for us to recycle. So I think the Buddy Bench project is probably one of those good stories that we were able to take something that was a low value commodity and actually turn it around and make something out of it. So the Buddy Bench project realistically started with Red Nose Day, and Red Nose Day is essentially a fundraiser which is about children, where customers can come in, purchase a red nose, and then the proceeds go to kids. And we've raised well over $27 million for them through this program. Next slide. So a while back, the question came up is, could we recycle these red noses? Now, red noses are made out of polyurethane foam. It's not easy to recycle. One of the few outlets for polyurethane foam is carpet padding. And carpet padding just wasn't a really, really good approach for us. So we started looking at other options. We also found that we had some materials that were mixed in mixed packaging. We can see here on the slide, you got the noses, but the noses are inside a plastic bag. There was a paper insert. And we found out that it made it even more difficult to try to recycle the moment you have some of these mixed materials, which a lot of recyclers try to gravitate away from. Next slide. So we started by setting up in-store recycling containers like we see over here. We actually had one of these containers in just about every one of our stores. And we started collecting the noses, and then we started looking for vendors. Let's go to the next slide, please. We found a vendor that had the capabilities of handling some of the different types of mixed material. And then we also found another vendor that can turn it into something a little bit different, and that's the bench. The next slide. And not just a bench, but kind of this Buddy Bench concept. And the Buddy Benches realistically are designed to kind of, designed to combat bullying in schools and provide a safe place for children to go if they feel like they're being bullied. We were actually able to get 1,500 red noses into each one of these benches and are actually still in the process of donating about 19 of these benches to schools across the country. We started the process of kind of the donation process last year, but then COVID hit. That kind of slowed things down because a lot of the schools started closing down. So we're still kind of in the process of kind of getting these out to some of the schools. Next slide. Here we can actually see two examples of two different Buddy Benches in two different schools. And this has been realistically a fantastic opportunity for us to take what is essentially a waste material and turn it back around into something that could benefit children. And if you think about it, this is kind of what Red Nose Day with the circular economy is all about.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, John, as well for the insights on the programs you're working on. Again, we've got quite a few Q&A, quite a few questions in the Q&A right now, so please feel free to continue adding those for those in the audience. Last but not least, we'll turn it over to Laura from Ulta Beauty to share a little bit about Ulta Beauty's recent partnership with Loop. So pass it over to you, Laura.
Thank you, Kayla. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me. Excited to be here with this group today. To understand how Loop and Ulta Beauty's perspective on reuse really started to develop, and I would say we're at the very beginning of our journey, both with Loop and in this space, I thought it might be helpful to understand how it fits with our overall approach. And for us, it starts with our guests. We know, and what we know about beauty guests in particular and beauty enthusiasts is that our consumers have become accelerating out of COVID, in fact, but increasingly conscientious over the past few years about making informed product choices. And we've seen that in rising interest in topics like clean beauty, sustainable practices, the treatment of animals, as all related to our progress and our products. So as part of our continued journey to provide guests with both the transparency and the options within our assortment as a beauty retailer, we launched a program in the fall called Conscious Beauty at Ulta Beauty. And it focuses across a number of key pillars that you see here. So there are 5: clean ingredients, cruelty-free, vegan, sustainable packaging, and positive impact. And the focus really is on 2 things. One, it's on providing guests that transparency within our assortment of what products comply with aspects of this program. And it's also about celebrating brands that have made substantial progress in these spaces. And so I know the focus today is talking about reuse and how it pertains particularly to the sustainable packaging pillar. But what's different about this program is how it holistically, addresses our guest needs in this space, kind of across what you see here. So moving to packaging, we know the cosmetics industry produces more than 120 billion global packaging units annually. And we also know, and I heard certainly the guys from Walgreens say the same, we want to be part of the solution. And we also know we aren't the only one that can be part of the solution. We're going to need to partner with others that are leading in this space. And for us, that includes our brand partners, and it includes external partners like Loop. So for Ulta Beauty and working with our brand partners, we've done a couple of things. First, we've set a goal to ensure that 50% of all of our packaging that's sold, including our own brand, will be made from recycled or biosourced materials or be recyclable or refillable by 2025. And related to reuse specifically, Loop is the partner for us to help advance the beauty industry's growth and encourage the industry forward in a positive way. And again, I think the progress, not perfection, certainly resonates with me as well. What Tom and his team have created for us is something we see as market leading. And as he often explains, it's not really a new concept, right? It has a parallel, and I like that parallel in the milk delivery example. It's a great way for us to explain the platform in a way that our consumers understand. For us, we partnered with Loop because of that direction and because of the momentum that they have in comparison to what's in market today and accessible to our guests. And we believe in what Tom and his team are doing and starting to build in terms of being really innovative when we think about solutions in this space. So if we go to the next slide, Loop, as Walgreens mentioned, is a circular platform. It's designed to eliminate waste. They directly work with our brand partners. And one of the things that they do is design packaging that's durable and able to be reused. The design is something that within the beauty industry is really important and has one of the aspects that I believe has tempered growth in this space. When you think of a luxury or prestige beauty product, the packaging, especially in cosmetics, is often small. It's heavy. It's coated with metallics. It's not able to be reused. And so Loop is helping us in redefining how consumers start to think about beauty packaging and starting to break some of that conventional thinking. We're thrilled about this partnership. We're actually the first specialty retailer and the first beauty retailer on the platform. And we're also fortunate to have Tom, who's obviously the CEO, who's been mentioned a couple of times on this call, CEO of Loop and TerraCycle, on our Conscious Beauty at Ulta Beauty Advisory Council as well. Tactically, in what you'll see to the right, and I know I don't want to be too repetitive, but a guest, when they shop for Ulta Beauty products on the site, they go to the Loop by Ulta Beauty site. They're shipped a product in a custom tote that's branded with Loop and Ulta Beauty, where even the zip tie is recycled and disposed of appropriately. The consumer pays a refundable deposit for the tote and the product. The customer uses the product, returns it, and the packaging, both the tote and the containers, are properly cleaned, right? Health and safety being extremely important in this platform, and refilled and to be distributed again. And if we go to the next slide, Loop by Ulta Beauty launched very recently. So March 3rd, actually, a couple of weeks ago. And the response so far has been amazing. We've been hearing strong consumer response from the time we even announced that the platform would go live, and that was back in the fall, through our social media channels in particular, and our brand partner interest, which I think is some of the momentum we'll need to make progress in this space, is off the charts, both since the announcement as well as since the platform going live a couple of weeks ago. So we're really excited to just be starting on this journey and supporting a more reusable platform, and excited to see the growth in the space overall, and certainly within beauty in particular. So thanks, Kayla.
Thank you, Laura. I'm really excited to see how some of the programs, particularly that Loop program, jumps off for Ulta Beauty. I think that's great. So thank you to all our speakers. What a great presentation today. We'll go ahead and move into our Q&A. So if folks have any lingering questions for Laura or any of our other speakers, please feel free to submit that via the Q&A box. We do have quite a few, so I'll get started to give some folks some time to finish submitting questions. I'll pose this question to Josephine. I just lost my spot here. But one of the polls that you had there, you polled for some of the barriers for the refill to home. What were some of the barriers? And one of the answers to that was lack of interest from, and I should say refill on the go, lack of interest from consumers to engage in this way of shopping. What opportunities or insight can you share with those that pick that may help reduce those barriers? And how do retailers engage consumers?
Yeah, so I think a good place to begin, and which is also I think what I touched upon a little bit in terms of the product types to focus on, could be with dried products where the packaging that the consumer actually has to bring to the retail is foldable. So it's not necessarily a big jar that they have to bring to refill, but they can actually bring a cotton bag or something like that. So that's one opportunity to really make it more convenient. There's of course also the distribution of the sale points. Really get innovative and creative about how could you do something like Algramo and maybe offer the refilling points in different spaces. Or I would say also the point about, and what we typically hear from many of the refill on the go pilots that have happened around, for example, retailers in the UK, is that it is quite important to have that, at least in the initial phases, have that staff on the ground, have some really good signage and communication about how to engage with this new way of shopping. And once customers have kind of maybe done that once or twice, then they really, it's so much more approachable for them. And then you can kind of phase out actually having that staff on the ground, of course. And then I would again highlight Miva as a really great example of how dispensing systems are just made in this very user-friendly way, where you have to, you're guided in how to put your cup up by the dispensing point, and once that cup is placed there or your packaging is placed there, the technology in the system can sense that, and it allows you to start refilling your product. So there's lots of different ways to enhance that user experience, I would say.
Great, thanks, Josephine. I'll turn to Kate for a question we had in the comments here. Is Walmart planning to, how does Walmart plan to utilize some of those beyond the bag solutions you've shared? Can you provide some insight on that?
At this point, can you guys hear me? I'll go on
yes.
video here. At this point, I think the intention is to pilot at least some of the solutions to learn better what the path is going to be forward. But I think it also will be dependent on the consortium partners and how we all work together to determine, different solutions and different learning. So TBD, sorry, we don't have more information, but the intention for sure is to pilot and learn.
Hey, Kayla, it's John. We're part of that initiative as well. And I would echo that. We're trying to figure out how we can all work together to figure out what eventually looks like the best solutions. So we're looking forward to trying some of these things because we think, again, it's more steps in the right direction.
Yep, great. And I think just as a follow-up to Kate, you listed a few innovative materials in your slides. And maybe John and Dan, you can speak to this as well. But Kate, you showed that you're exploring or using, compostable or seaweed-based bags. Those were some of the innovative materials you identified. What are some of the challenges you've faced in exploring that, or if you were to potentially use compostable or seaweed-based bags?
Sure, and John, please feel free to jump in on this. So I think, as we look at different materials, there are challenges that have to be at least acknowledged as far as, sort of recycling infrastructure versus lack of maybe composting infrastructure, and what some of the consequences would be if a type of bag is launched without the appropriate education or without addressing some of these issues. Because of course, the idea would be if you have a compostable bag, you want to get it composted, that would be the intention, right? But without access and then the potential of contamination, how do you address both? And then obviously the education component as well. John, you have anything else to add?
No, I think you're exactly right. And as we said from the beginning on the initiative, there's no silver bullet, there's no perfect answer. That's what we're looking for, and continue to explore every opportunity that we have. But each one brings its own challenges along, and until we can find one that solves all of the problems, we're going to continue to have them. So really, this is more of a let's cast the net as wide as we can, pull back what innovation can show us and what's out there and what the opportunities are, put it into practice a little bit and figure out, is it something that we're finding now? Is it a combination between a couple different solutions? But how do we continue to move the ball down the field, knowing that there just isn't that one perfect thing out there, at least that we haven't found it yet. Hopefully there is, but the idea is just continue to advance and figure out how we can all work together to solve it.
And I will add, given that the subject of this webinar is reuse, that obviously reuse is a big one if we can get people to reuse bags, just because you're reducing the waste on the front end. So how do you do that as well?
Yeah, one of the things we struggle with on that is we can't make anybody do anything, right? So is there some incentivizing that we could put into place? Is there a way for us to reward the behavior we want people to exhibit? So this is a good opportunity to try all those things and figure out which bits and pieces of it seem to solve the most of the problems.
Yeah, and you're both speaking to another question here on it's not enough for one retailer to sort of get on this bus, but for everyone to join and get on. What type of partnerships, and I'll pose this to all our retailers, what type of partnerships with other retailers or brands would be helpful for you to advance reuse or upstream innovation programs or projects?
So I think we're completely open to working with anybody to solve the problems. We work in lots of different areas, like RELA obviously is one, the Beyond the Bags another. We work through the CGF quite a bit. That's one area where it's very heavy on the manufacturing side. It would be very helpful to the retailers if more retailers would get involved in that. We seem to voice our opinion quite a bit, as does Walmart, but that's really where the retailer piece of that ends. And therefore, the solutions that they come up with through CGF seem to be much more manufacturer-based rather than through the retailer's eyes, which, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of other people telling us how to solve problems. I like to try to figure out how to solve them on our own, collaboratively with the CPGs and manufacturers upstream and the other retailers. So, that's one area where I think that it brings a pretty wide group of people, but it seems very segmented right now, that the retailers have a smaller voice in the process. And I think really to solve it, it's going to take both, and we can't have people just looking at through their lens. They need to look at it from beginning end, cradle to grave, whatever way you like to look at those kinds of things.
Yeah, I'll just add. Oh, go ahead. Who's this? Right, go ahead.
Laura. Yep, thanks. I would say, for Ulta Beauty, very similar to John. I mean, we're extraordinarily open right now to partner with anyone. I mean, for beauty in particular, the end-to-end concept is really important. So for us, wish list. I mean, certainly some of the packaging suppliers, and starting there, right? So, and which is why, again, kind of Loop for us felt like a good starting point, thinking about the redesign. And starting to get ahead of some of the problems. But, for us, the brand partners also play a critical role. And as with, other industries, I think the more we start to see kind of retailers or traditional competitors coming together to solve the problem, that's really what it's going to take. And so we're extremely open to partnering with other retailers, both in beauty, in retail broadly, et cetera, to start to really solve the problem.
I'll just add to that. So this is Kate. I totally agree with both you guys. And I think that the collaborative aspect does go beyond, it's among retailers, but then it is beyond that, right? Because as Josephine mentioned, and thank you for that presentation. I thought that was really awesome. As we want to do better design, but you also have to look at that whole impact and what are you trying to solve for? And there's going to be multiple things, right? So we have to look at that whole thing, and there's going to be sort of multiple stakeholders involved in those conversations as we test different solutions.
John, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I was going to go slightly on topic, but slightly off. So on the design aspect of things, when you start talking about some of the secondary and tertiary packaging and the things that we have to deal with as part of these processes, I think that's where, we start getting into some of those terms around, it's all recyclable, and the difference between something being recyclable and easily recycled, or it's sometimes two very different things. So that upstream piece to all of this, I think, can't get lost in any of this. I tell people that work on that in our group that their job's to put me out of business, because I deal with a very tangible piece of, now we have it, what do we do with it? And there's a whole other group solving to try to make me have less of it. So, when those two things can come together, I think that's when you're going to start seeing some real progress in this area. And I don't think that everybody's always looking at it through the same lens. Again, I think that lens gets a little distorted by, what's your purview, and once it's out of my hands, I don't really worry about it anymore. That's where some of the EPR conversations and things like that come in. So it's just one of these things that you have to look at it very segmented, because you're trying to solve a particular problem, but also more holistically around what's the ultimate goal of what we're trying to solve here.
Great, thank you all. I'm going to go back to Josephine real quick. There's a couple of questions for you as far as some of the folks you covered in your slides. One around the Tesco cans. So this question is, how did the Tesco cans remain in place without the plastic?
Yeah, so to my knowledge, it wasn't quite visible on the picture on the slide, but to my knowledge, they still have the cans in these in the cardboard trays, I guess you could say. So with the help of those, they remain in place and still remain quite stackable in the store. So from my knowledge, it wasn't something that they experienced to be, a big negative consequence of removing that piece of packaging.
Great. And I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, but it's around the Lush phone application and how they have the ability to eliminate the need for packaging. How did Lush think about the access options for customers that don't have a smartphone? Again, not sure if that's more of a Lush question or if you have some insight to that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can provide super detailed insights on that specifically and what kind of process they had been going through. I could imagine that they had probably been trying to understand with the knowledge that they have or could gain about their customers, what are the general demographic of that customer base? Are they typically customers that would have a smartphone, etc.? And then maybe based on that, infer a decision about, it actually does make sense to have a primary communication be over a smartphone. And I believe that also in the store, they do actually have signs around by the different soaps where you can read about the product. So there is that element as well, I think.
Great, thank you, Josephine. I just want to pause for those in the audience. We're going to get ready to launch our feedback poll. We're going to continue with the Q&A, but that will be on in the background, so please fill that out. When you get a moment, we'll continue with the Q&A, but we appreciate your feedback on how you thought the webinar went today, and we'll use that information to inform future webinars. So I have a question here about life cycle assessment. So I'll pose this to the whole group, as I'm not sure who would be best to answer that, but are there life cycle assessments that have been done that can show why reusable e-commerce mailers would be better environmentally than paper or plastic options?
I'm sure that perhaps maybe some of the other panelists also have some insights on this, but I know that there has recently been published a paper from, I believe it was Zero Waste Europe, who published kind of a literature review of existing LCAs that have been done on reusable packaging, and they actually focused on different types of reusable or different packaging types. So there was something about bottles, there was something about cups, and there was a section, I think, about e-commerce mailers or typical like boxes that you would ship in. So I think there are some insights, especially in this report, that could be useful for that attendee.
Dan, I see you're unmuted. Did you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I took a quick glance. I saw the question that came up on LCAs a little bit ago. And I did see that Loop actually did publish some guidance over here. And kind of what they're indicating is that after 10 reuses of one of their items, there's a 35% reduction in global warming potential. And so I'm just seeing this on a Waste Dive article right now. I'm assuming that there probably is a little bit more of this detail that's out there, but sometimes it's just not the easiest to find.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's ongoing, Kayla. It's constantly evolving and constantly gathering more information and trying to figure out, are we on the right path here or are we on the wrong path here? And not having that perfect solution, again, I think it's probably sometimes it's a good path, sometimes it's not quite as good a path, but we have to continue to take swings to curb some of the problems that we've all created together.
Absolutely. Question for you, John and Dan, and Laura, maybe you can speak to this as well. John, you had a slide that showed that through the Loop program, you have to have multiple uses to start seeing that positive environmental impact. How do you drive consumers to use the Loop program enough to see that, that curve you're showing, to see that positive environmental impact?
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person in the organization to answer this one for you, but I mean, it's just like anything else. That's that incentivized piece, right? How do you get people to exhibit the behaviors you want them to exhibit? So in this case, it's to use it multiple times, to continue to come back and use it in a way that makes sense for them, but also continues to provide positives for the environment. And certainly, we're a business after all, so to continue that three-pronged approach of people, planet, profit is always very much in our minds. And I think from my perspective on solving some of these problems, it really is that incentivizing the consumer piece, and it's incentivizing our business to continue to take positive steps in the right direction. And again, I have a hard time getting my kids to do the things I want them to do. So trying to get a consumer to do the things I want them to do is equally, if not more difficult. So it really is, we have to educate. I heard, I don't know if it was Kate that used that word earlier. I think that's a key piece, because in a lot of ways, I think people make changes in their daily life thinking that they're doing the right thing, and come to find out it's just making things a little more difficult. There's been times that we've, had meetings and we bring in materials that are compostable, but we don't have any composting options. So the people that ordered thought they were doing the right thing, but in the end it just made things a little bit more difficult for us. So a lot of it's around education, incentivization, getting people to understand what it is that we're trying to do, and we should all be doing it together.
Yeah, I mean, for us, kind of tactically and different probably in beauty than in other industries, education is a key focus. So very much what John said, and that comes to life in beauty different ways, right? So we have obviously incentives in terms of loyalty program and things of that nature that are kind of the more typical go-tos when you're trying to motivate consumer behavior. We have other ways to influence some of the purchasing decisions through some of our beauty influencers, through our brands directly. And so for us, it really is focused on education. It is focused on education across constituents too. I would say for us, the brand partner is equally as important to educate in many cases as the consumer.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, John. So we're about a minute before time, so to be respectful of everyone who's joined us and our speakers, we'll go ahead and do our concluding slides. So thank you for that great Q&A. Had some really good questions come in, and thank you to our speakers for answering those. Next slide. So don't miss our future webinars. We've got a lot coming up. So if you aren't signed up for our RCC alerts, please join our mailing list. Again, we will get these slides over to you afterwards, and the recording will be available, so you can click through some of these links here. But the RCC alerts is the best way to keep up to date with some of the topics we're talking about today, as well as future webinars. Next slide. If you have any questions for the Retail Compliance Center team or ideas for future webinars, our information is listed here. Any questions for today's webinar, we are happy to share out with our speakers. So thank you to all who have provided feedback. If you haven't done so, please do that. The webinar survey is still open. And again, thank you to our speakers, Laura, Josephine, Dan, Kate, John. We really appreciate you joining us today and taking some time to talk about upstream innovation, focusing on reuse. So with that, I'll go ahead and conclude our webinar today. Thank you to those listening in, and thank you again to our speakers. Have a great day.